Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural issue of Chasing the Dream. This is a podcast dedicated to conversations with people about their experiences in corporate America and also their relationship with organizational culture. And I can't even begin to say how excited I am to have on the inaugural issue, the first ever Chasing the Dream, my friend, Phil Maffei. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ethan. I didn't realize this was the first one. I'm honored. So
You,
I
it's an
appreciate that.
honor and a privilege. It's all mine, buddy.
Man.
So just to kind of level set people's understanding and awareness of you and your background, Phil has spent over 15 years in strategic finance roles, leading teams in global organizations through some pretty significant transformation. In his prior roles, he's managed forecasting of P&Ls in excess of $1 billion in EBITDA. He's also designed and implemented ERP systems, and his last day job in corporate America, he was in a corporate finance process lead role during a 2-year, $6 billion sales process project with Dun & Bradstreet. Phil, welcome to the program.
Man, that's a hell of an intro. Much appreciated.
As I said before, Phil, the pleasure is all ours. And you and I have had many conversations about our experiences in corporate America, and something you had shared with me early on in your career, where all of a sudden you didn't realize it was going to happen, and you became responsible for a little bit of a staff reduction project. Can you kind of share a little bit about what that meant for you?
Dating myself a little bit here, but starting, I always like to brag that cut my teeth in the wake of the Great Recession. Right, started my first corporate finance job in 2008. So it was, as I always say, it's a great time for somebody cheap and low in the totem pole because everyone else around you is, at least in those big multinational, behemoths of companies. There was a lot of layoffs and a lot of headcount reductions. So this was my first experience with a private equity company purchasing a publicly traded company. So that happened shortly after I started with Avaya. And then not too long after that, I think to what we discussed, I found myself in a corporate finance role tracking, a roughly 50% headcount reduction of 15,000 employees globally. So I reported to the CFO, or rather the vice president of finance at the time, every week with my updated headcount reduction tracking file and how much money we were going to save because this couldn't afford to keep all these people around anymore.
So I have to ask you, buddy. I mean, what was that like? I mean, as you said earlier on in your career, all of a sudden you're reporting high up the chain of command, week in, week out, about pushing people out of an organization for savings, for, as you said, headcount reduction and savings. I mean, what did that feel like? I mean, what was that experience?
Right, there's like this cognitive dissonance going on where they call it restructuring, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
don't call it what it is, which is people losing their jobs. It's like this, great. I guess the way they tries to be framed is the for the greater good of everybody, we need to right size the workforce, and over the years of just poor hiring practices and bad management of spend, and kind of get to this point where the cost base for the business was too inflated, and the company was trying to put phones on people's desks when cell phones were first becoming like super popular, right? So it's just not quite the right strategic direction from a top line perspective, which was resulting in a lot of pressure on the margins. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of big businesses where the first place to look and the business line is usually the people and the cost kind of carrying headcount and all the stuff that goes along with that. So it was a
So
eye-opening experience early on in my career, my friend. That is for sure. They kind of like I didn't never do anything else. Like, is this normal? Is this how this always goes down? But learned since then that that's not necessarily the case.
And so it's interesting. You talk about they were kind of thinking about their strategic direction. They were shifting their focus. And so it's headcount reduction or restructuring. And you said something really interesting. You said they never really call it what it is. And what was that experience like? And you said that was early on in your career. What were some other experiences before you went and started your own fractional CFO business?
I think a lot of it, kind of seeing how things got done and how I would want to do them differently was, I think, the impetus of, kind of letting the entrepreneur in me kind of come out and kind of go down that road. But, a lot of on those days, really, it was a good experience, right? Because I was getting, as people were losing their jobs, someone still needed to do all the work, and I was getting promotions and kind of, not realizing that I was probably getting paid fractions of what these people were getting paid to do their jobs, and some of my old one that I kind of dragged along with me. It was a really good experience from that perspective. But it was, a little soul draining to watch, kind of in these meetings with people reporting on these headcount reductions in their departments. And then the next week I saw their names on the list and I was reporting that somebody else was giving me that update. So it really kind of instilled this, low value on the employee, at least from that kind of first experience of, which over a period of time I was just kind of had enough of, and started exploring other opportunities. I learned what a furlough was back in those days, right? It was a very interesting time to start a career in corporate finance, and kind of seeing how that all unfolds, and how people, I guess, kind of buckle under that pressure, right? If they got new investors and they've got to figure out a way to make things profitable, and the low hanging fruit, the kind of the big numbers that just jump out on the P&Ls. That's the first place they think to look.
Yeah. But I mean, you talk about the lessons learned in terms of organizational focus on profitability. People come far after the profit and making your months and making your quarters. I mean, what were the takeaways from that throughout, as you kind of navigated past that experience through other opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it did frame what I was looking for when I was leaving that job, looking for the next one, where little did I know I'd find myself doing this whole PE private company dance, only with a lot more experience and being a lot more involved, several years later. But I was looking for a sense of cohesion and a good team to be a part of, right? And not one where anybody was on the chopping block on any given week or month, depending on if we weren't meeting meeting that month or that quarter's target, right? So that was really the impetus for the switch that I made over to D&B after my Avaya days, and was fortunate enough to find myself on a really high performing team doing corporate finance roles, and a lot of the skills that I was able to build upon there that I had picked up along the way, and then see how maybe do things a little bit better, right? And how to do things in a way that aren't quite so focused on cutting cost as a way to drive profitability, I guess.
I'd love to just kind of ping you on that in terms of the transition from Avaya to D&B, because you and I talked about the fact that I actually worked at D&B about a decade before you, and I know what an amazing culture it was back then. What were some of the differences between the culture there and the predecessor organization? And because you just said something interesting, you said the lesson from Avaya was you wanted to work on a constructive team. What was that like at D&B? How did you know what you were looking for? How did you know when you would find it? And what was the experience like?
Yeah, I think culturally speaking, they were in a very different place, primarily because they were profitable, right? They were still, a publicly traded company at the time. And I always liked that, from my roles in the organization, I liked the bigger the better it was for me, at least from a perspective of a corporate finance role and trying to, see how the whole thing works, right? So I was looking for that. I was looking to kind of stay in that world where I had visibility into not just one big bitter piece of the business, but rather the whole thing, and kind of in those conversations around what's the strategy and how does that get reflected in the financials, right? And so that's really where I've kind of tried to focus the core of my career, and a really good opportunity in that space had presented itself. You interview with people, you don't know after a 30-minute conversation how it's going to be like to work with them for 10 years. But I was super fortunate in the sense that, the team that I was on, the bill I was working around, were really good, really, really good at what they did. A lot of stuff to learn. One of them is working with me today, right? So I built a lot of really good friendships, a lot of really good bonds. And a lot of it was owed to the leader of our team. He was effectively the CFO's right-hand guy. But he did a really good job of, holding people's feet to the fire, but at the same time, giving them a lot of really good learning opportunities, and, creating that sense of team cohesion, right? So a lot of just, whether it's, we would know how many times he and I just had a beer and a burger and went back to work some nights when we had to work late, right? It was like the little things like that I kind of remember about, wanting to go above and beyond because you felt like you were a part of something that was a little bit bigger, versus, I think it's a matter of being appreciated, right? Where I think in my first life, things felt a little unappreciated, a little bit, kind of just dispensable. Whereas, in this new place I had found myself, there was certainly a lot of opportunities to grow and to learn and to, be around people that I actually enjoy being around. And I was in that mentality of workaholic culture in those days, right? So I was working the 50, 60, 70-hour week. So it was good to be around people that I liked and kind of be able to blow off some steam and that be a part of what we were doing. So that was, big shift.
I mean, it's interesting. You talk about this big picture changing culture from prior organization to the one you landed at, but you say a lot of things that really resonate with me. I mean, you talk about recognizing people going above and beyond and the opportunity to learn and grow. And you said a few times during that explanation, the sense of team. I mean, what were some of the specific things that they did there, or your boss specifically, that kind of encouraged that sense of in it together and teamwork, and also the rewarding and recognizing, which you've kind of said a few times when we've talked about it, was important to you at that point in your career?
Yeah, I think I think culturally, DMB did a good job, even at the highest levels of, kind of executive sponsorship around just a lot of different things, right? So, going to baseball games and team events and outings and having, different things going on at the corporate campus that we worked at down in Short Hills. So there was a lot of it going on at the kind of cultural level from the company was really trying to drive. We at one point had a CEO who brought a marching band across. The fourth floor was where all the executives sit. So it was one of them had some party one day where there was literally a marching band kind of like marching around the fourth floor of the building. So there was that piece of it there, and then kind of on our individual team where there was 6 or 7, 8 of us at the core of this kind of financial operations department. It was similar type of stuff where a lot of offsites, and there's a lot of like friendly bonding stuff. The old boss used to have barbecues in his backyard all the time, and we'd go hang out with him and his wife and his cat, and like have a good time. And there was an element of we're gonna work hard, but also like the recognition of like let's bag out here early on a Friday, go have lunch and then go home, or like okay, we worked hard last weekend, let's kind of balance that out however we can. There was a lot of high demanding stuff, right? And kind of maybe a little pressure that was maybe or maybe not needed to be there. But I kind of like to thrive in those type of environments. It's maybe not for everybody, but
Right.
it suited the way that I like to operate in the sense that there would seem to be a bigger picture goal that we were all working towards together. You know, so Sach, my boss, he was the kind of guy that never asked you to do anything that he wasn't willing to do. Like he complained all the time. I said, "You guys left without me." Like he was in the office all the time. We were kind of like, we'd leave at 8 o'clock and he'd still be there working. So it was one of those like, kind of lead by example. And, as a result of it, a lot of hard work came with a lot of good opportunities to, like I talked about before, where I like to see the whole company and what's going on in the intricate strategy conversations and that type of thing, as opposed to maybe some other roles you find in a corporate finance gig where you only kind of, you're privy to a small piece of the picture.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we had actually talked to quite a bit about that, about the idea of you being able to see how your work fits into the bigger picture is something that not a lot of folks get, regardless of whether they're in corporate finance or me in marketing or any other functional area. You see the little pieces of your world, but you don't see kind of a whole puzzle put together.
Right.
One of the things I've always was amazed when we talked about your experience and your career and kind of the narrative arc of it. You've got all these great experiences, and then you make a decision. I'm going to go out and on my own. I guess my question is, what kind of formed, I guess, what was the impetus for you deciding, I want to start this business, sustain a business, that you just decided it's time for me to go out and explore creating something on my own?
Yeah, so I kind of love as I've reflected on this, it seemed like good timing and the kind of the universe unfolds as it should, and I'm a believer in that. And as of kind of what you described earlier, we went through this big 2-year process, and then new ownership came in, right? So as new ownership comes in, their private equity, like we discussed, same story. I see the same movie happening again that I saw the very beginning of my career, where all people I knew and worked with and that trusted me and I trusted them were gone. And then all new management had come in. So it was like, all right, there's a little bit of a changing of the guard. And this was right around the COVID time where I was driving an hour back and forth each way. And I was getting awfully comfortable, working from home and kind of, doing this thing a little bit. I was like, wait a second, my commute to my office here is a lot shorter than it is going to Short Hills from where I live. So, it's really always at the end of the day, my business partner, really good friend of mine from our college days together. And, over maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years prior to that, we had always kind of like, hey, I'm doing this thing, you should really come come do it with me. As he was been doing the serial entrepreneur thing his whole career and had landed on this what was the early days of this fractional CFO model where he was the entrepreneur with the finance background in the ventures, so he became the CFO for a variety of these companies he was in by default.
Yeah.
So it was, I think, a combination of kind of this changing of the guard and kind of having this milestone in my career where like kind of who did the thing, and now it's it's another onto other projects and maybe ones that I can maybe not want to be a part of. So it was just the universe kind of presented me this opportunity where now is a good time as any to do what I always wanted to do, where I kind of scratched that entrepreneurial itch. And early before my corporate career, I had done a variety of different trying to start businesses and that sort of thing, and it just timing was right, and I felt like I had that special balance of good healthy 15 years of experience, so I knew what I was doing. At the same time, still enough energy to kind of take on this, do all that stuff, and then try to run the business that I'm trying to operate simultaneously. So here we are, 4 years later, and wouldn't change it for the world. Wouldn't go back to the way things were. But,
That was that, buddy. You read my mind. That was the follow-up question. Is when you're going out on your own, the uncertainty, and you think it's the logical decision, but you don't know because you don't have the benefit of hindsight. So you're 4 years into it, and you and I've talked about a little bit of the psychological roller coaster, but you don't regret it for a minute. And that's awesome. I mean, that's really why we go out and do these things on our own. And I guess my question for you is that the experiences you had, you talked about private equity firms and kind of certain things you looked for and certain things you don't want anymore in your career. How'd that form the basis for how you structure your business, how you go about pursuing clients and partnering with people? Like, how does that narrative behind you, that wind in your sail, kind of form the basis of all the stuff you do day in and day out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was, joining up with Josh, there were certain things I was like, we're going to do things a little bit differently than I was used to doing them, right? Where we don't want to, we're not looking for the personality that necessarily wants to work 80 hours a week, and like that, grind culture is maybe not, maybe hasn't done us any favors, and we can have a whole other conversation on that at some point. I was that guy, right? I was the guy that was like, I was more than happy to grind. I thought there was always this bigger, better thing for me the harder I worked.
Right. Right.
And we kind of approach things a little bit differently, where we want to maintain that capacity in your life, where it's like kind of creating the space to work in, and hoping to be able to bring people with a lot of breadth and depth of experience that ultimately wouldn't find themselves in maybe a smaller organization because they quite frankly can't afford to pay that salary, right? So a lot of the companies we work with today, 10 years ago, they really wouldn't have had the option of having somebody working with them for a couple hours a week, right? Maybe the commute would be too long. It just would have to be a kind of lightning in a bottle to make those logistics worthwhile to have that operation work. So we always try to do things with that perspective of hey, we're looking for folks who want to work 20, 30 hours a week or a month, right? Whatever it may be, and from wherever you want, and kind of create that flexibility and space so that we can, bring meaningful work to folks, and at the same time provide a really great value for our clients, because they ultimately wouldn't have access to somebody with this level of experience, because they would be looking for a salary that just would be unreasonable for a full-time job, right? And I think the other piece of it is, I always like being a part of the team. And I was just in one of my clients holds a conference. They did the first one last year, the inaugural conference, their second one this year. And, I get there, I get a team badge. Like, I feel like I'm a part of the team, right? I'm not just like this outsourced fractional CFO, but like, it's like, I'm the guy in their cell phones. I get phone calls about like, hey, I'm just thinking about this. Like, I like to stay a part of the team, but like, I don't have to be that's not the only team I'm on, right? I can kind of, I think we've gotten to the point in our business now where we're really focused on finding folks who are, kind of these purpose-driven entrepreneurs in these spaces that we believe are, where we think the economy needs to go, where we're kind of generally speaking, we all need to go. So that's, I think our ultimate end game is to try to bring these, kind of sustainable business practices, right? And especially from a workload and culture perspective, as you know, which is hard, right? We're doing, you and I don't think we haven't met in person, right? We have plenty of really great Zoom conversations, but
not yet.
Not yet. I was almost on my way into the city for this until I realized that we were doing this one live, but maybe sometime in the future. But I think you can appreciate, and I know you work a lot of your clients around that idea of like, how do we create that great culture that I was really enjoying being in a world where we weren't in the same room all the time, right? So I'll try to get to an event my clients hosting just to have a little bit of face-to-face time, because I'm always grateful for them being able to do this, but there's nothing replacing that,
Right.
being in the same room together either.
And I mean, you
I don't
touched
know if
on
you
so
feel that
many
way.
things.
Yeah, no,
Phil,
I know you're totally all over the place right now. No.
no, actually not, because everything that you're talking about is kind of tying the threads together of the DNA of going out on your own. And you have a partner, Josh. I didn't have a partner when I launched this Chazen group 13 years ago, but there's a sense of loneliness. And so it's nice to be able to serve clients so that you're a part of the team. And my question is, COVID comes around and now everybody's working virtually, hybrid schedules post COVID, but we're trying to build a culture and people are spread out. And in your business model, in a fractional CFO model, you're providing a set of solutions in terms of matching people with your clients. So I guess my question for you is, team has always been important to you, strong relationships. I know I've learned is important to you. How do you kind of cultivate that, or how do you make that a point of your company's value construct as maybe even a differentiator from what other people do?
Yeah, for me, I love where these conversations go, because you kind of get to the core of like, what are we really doing this for? And I think it's to be able to create that, environment where it's a win for everybody, in the sense that, the client gets support. That's awesome, right? And the person providing that support feels appreciated, and they feel like they have the autonomy to be able to do that. Like, I'm not micromanaging anything, right? Like, and especially I'm in a comfort where we're growing our business to the point where I'm tapping people that I used to work with on the shoulder. So I know that they're more than capable. And it's just a matter of like, hey, is this work fulfilling for you, right? We do like, in lieu of being together in person, people that are local to me, my business partner's in Maryland, I'm in New Jersey. So like we get together as frequently as he can, but, because he and I have such a good relationship doing things this way, we'll just get the team together, buy everybody lunch, and just kind of sit around on a Zoom call.
Right.
You and I have done before. We'll watch a TED Talk or a podcast and sit around and talk about it. And
Yep.
we're always really conscious of kind of talking about the things that are interesting to us, right? So you and I've talked about this, the concept of stakeholder capitalism, and in some of these more novel ideas that I think if they were a little more persuasive and a little more pervasive, and they are becoming that in the normal conversations in business, maybe the world I lived in at Avaya, where the first solution was chop 50% of your headcount, maybe there would have been other conversations had.
Right.
And I think, that broader, like, hey, if we could change the world, what would we do? I think that's, ultimately, I feel like you and I are akin in that way, where it's like, if we can create this really great place to work that's doing something that's a lot of people see value in, then, like that's really the ultimate goal for us. And then anyway, we can do that virtually, right? Having fun and, try to bring that to the game, because it's not all about just working all day every day, right? But rather finding that
Yeah.
space to live your life and to, be there for your family and be there for the things you want to do for yourself, while at the same time, finding that balance of, hey, there's plenty of fulfilling work to do also. So
Yeah. It's fascinating because, like you said, every time you and I talk, it's always a question of, oh, wow, we kind of gravitate towards the similarities in what we each experienced throughout our journey through corporate America and our survival of it. And one of the things that always came out of, I always loved our talks, because one of the things I shared to you is when I went out on my own, I mean, I didn't have the option. I kind of was transitioned or downsized out, but being on my own gave me the opportunity to be hands-on, always there father for my daughter, and always being around and kind of being able to pick and choose what I valued. Then you and I have talked a lot about when you started Sustain a Business, you took some key experiences from your own career. And I guess that leads me to, as we talk about, the next 5 years for you, or the next 10 years growing your business, where would you want to see Sustain a Business kind of organically grow to? Like, when you and Josh talk about the future, or you're thinking of the future, you have now 4 years of running the business and 15 plus years in corporate America. What would you want to start, putting those goalpost markers down for your legacy?
I love the big picture thinking, because I think, as right, when you're in the business and running it every day, it's taking the blinders off and thinking about what am I doing this for in the first place, right? And I love that. That's what I love about you, is because we're always kind of going there, and I think that's important to not lose sight of, right?
Yep.
So over the last year, we've been doing a little. I mentioned to you, right? And you're asking me for, like, send me a logo. I was like, well, we're doing a little soft rebrand.
Yeah.
We're taking some steps to try to really be conscious about how we build an image for our business, and those things that we just discussed. Like, I want that to be, what we're all about, and how people, they want to, come work with us knowing they're going to have that expectation of, kind of that culture where we're trying to cultivate, and we kind of just talked about. So I think that's probably paramount. Yeah, I foresee a lot of the folks that I used to work with, right? Friend of mine, she's pregnant right now. It's like, come work with me for 6 months. Well, you work a couple hours in the middle of the night if you wanted to, right? Like kind of preparing to provide what I think is going to be really important, these, fractional business opportunities to people with really great depth and breadth of experience for whatever reason, don't want to be a part of that hustle culture anymore. I want to be able to kind of take as many clients, because the way we structure our arrangements, where it's like, hey, I know it's going to be X amount of work per month or whatever it may be. And it's like, hey, I can sign up for, this is my capacity, right? And being really conscious of matching people's capacity that they want for whatever reason, right? I want to, be a better, you said, be a better father to my daughter, or I want to be able to do these other things that bring fulfillment to my life. And it's like, I think it's been culturally, historically, like, this is all you do. This is your job, right? Like, you're working for my company, and like, that's your only thing. And for us, it's how do we cultivate this kind of sense of fulfillment, whatever that may be. So I think that's probably the cornerstone of it. And, over the last year, we've been doing a lot of work in terms of developing tools that we want to bring to our clients. So you touched on in your fantastic introduction, the development of, kind of accounting systems and tools, and how do we do this job that we call strategic finance more efficiently.
Yeah.
So we're real excited to roll out a new tool. We've just signed up to kind of bring to our clients that allows us to do that. So put a lot of investment in how do we run this business the way we want to, kind of, to meet up with those expectations. There's a level of efficiency and tools that we need to kind of provide our team with to be able to do that and kind of be efficient in the time that they are working, be able to kind of pass the ball and kind of not lose sight of things as they take, kind of the space and time between whatever those engagements may look like. So kind of short answer is really, cultivating that cultural element of things, bringing new people into the fold. We started that this year with our first CFO that isn't myself or Josh. And then, excited to roll out these tools and this new brand image going into the new year to really, bring in more clients in those spaces that we want to be in, with that big picture goal of, just change the world, right? Kind of have, be there to support companies that we know that are doing that, right? I think in our space that we, kind of provide that structure to play our role in the management of cash flow and making sure that our clients can keep their eyes on the prize, right? Embed ourselves as parts of the team. And at the end of the day, I always say is like, I'd rather, I want to be that trusted advisor. Right? I want to be that person to pick up the call if you got a question about, kind of, okay, some keep you up at night about your financials. Like, I think that's the biggest value. And what I've heard that my clients have told me that I think I kind of take away as my biggest achievement, where it's like, I got a question and I don't sweat it. I just pick up the phone and ask you, right? It's something that's not my wheelhouse, right? It's like, instead of this causing all kinds of anxiety, I have someone that I can go to, and I can just, I can get my download, I can get this off my chest and hear myself talk more than anything most of the time. But I think that's really, if we can get to that place where, we've got a bunch of folks in someone's ear, kind of giving them that good advice and being able to help guide them on their mission, I think we're doing all right, for a foreseeable future.
Yeah, first of all, Phil, I just want to say thanks again for willing to come on Chasing the Dream and talk about your career and your experiences. And one of the things that struck me early on when you and I started cultivating a relationship, right? We haven't actually met in person yet. We're on opposite sides of the Hudson River. I'm on the good side in New York. You're on the other side in New Jersey, where I spent 20 years. But we've talked a lot about your kind of mission earlier in your career, and then going out on your own with Josh, your partner, and the way you serve your clients. One thing that's always impressed me is the focus that you have on building relationships. And you and I both have talked about post-COVID, clients, partners, employees, they're all starved now for some meaningful humanistic interaction, whether it's virtual or in person. That's what that was one of the lasting kind of legacies we got. And I'm just really excited to continue our relationship. And so, hey, to help people, if they want to learn more about Phil Maffei and sustain a business, how would you suggest people follow up with you or learn more about you and your business?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to the Sustain a Business website. It's the newly branded sneak peek at, if I'd always like to bring Ethan a new stuff for you, so you get to be the first one. SustainCFO.com is up and live, so you can go check us out there. Check us out on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect, and like you said, I love to have a good conversation. You never know where it winds up. 3 or 4 years later, whatever it's been, you and I, doing podcasts together, right? Where it kind of started just as like, you got to talk to this guy, Ethan. He's a pretty cool dude. Even though he's a Cowboys
Always,
fan, he's all right. So,
always.
it's like,
So just what people said, sustain a business, sustain CFO. Also, there'll be a link to the website when you go down and look in the description below. And again, Phil, thanks for appearing on Chasing the Dream, a podcast dedicated to just talking about organizational culture. Thanks, Phil.
thanks,
Take
Ethan.
care.
Have a great one.
You too. Bye-bye.